I'm Dr. Deb Butler, and you are listening to Thinner Peace in Menopause and Beyond. This is episode number 487. And today it's all about a listener's questions. And I'm sure they're the same questions that you have too. So stay tuned. Welcome to Thinner Peace in Menopause and Beyond. This is Dr. Deb Butler, Master Life and Weight Coach, and as always, your coach. If you're a woman and you're smart and you're successful and you've been struggling with weight your whole life, and now menopause is making it harder than ever, and you are ready to make this the last time you ever have to go on a diet again, then this podcast is for you. Stay tuned. Well, hello, all my dear friends all over the world. It's a hot, steamy day here in the Midwest, but it doesn't stop me from getting outside, getting out a little bit earlier, and going for a beautiful walk in nature, getting a little sweaty, but being connected to the earth helps me connect to myself. And it's something that I know makes me feel better, even though what my brain has to offer is I'm a little tired, it's too hot, I don't want to go. But I have learned how to handle this toddler tantrum by doing what I call tough love, or even better, the power of love and saying no sometimes, which means, sweetheart, I know it's hot and I know you're tired, but I also know this. You will feel so much better when you're done. And I have so much evidence that this is true that it's very easy for me in my brain to get with the program very, very quickly, which is a lot of what I have to talk about today, because I had one of my listeners email me a couple questions, and I really encourage all of you to send me questions because it lets me know what one person asked me is usually what hundreds of people want to know. So keep your letters coming and I'll read them whenever I get them. And I don't have to say your name and I won't say her name either, but I will read her questions and she knows that I'm going to answer them on the air. So I'm hoping that she's listening so that she can understand better how the Thinner Peace process works, because it does work, but it's also a process. So before I go into her questions, I just want to talk about a few pointers about Thinner Peace, which is my process for helping women who've been struggling with weight their whole life learn how to be connected to their bodies and lose weight at the same time by eating when you're hungry and stopping when you're full. And it is only for women going through menopause who have never been able to do this before. In other words, the women that I'm talking to have been struggling with weight their whole lives and have been on diets and outside sources instead of really being connected to the inside source, which is the mind-body connection. So if you're one of those women who have always had that mind-body connection and you find that you're gaining weight, even though you're doing the same thing that you've always done, this may not be the podcast for you because it may be a different issue. It may be a hormonal issue. However, if you're one of those women and you've been struggling with weight your whole life and menopause is making it harder than ever, and you don't even know what I'm talking about when I talk about eat when you're hungry and stop when you're full, like you don't even know when you're hungry and know when you're full and never have, this podcast is for you, because menopause is the perfect time to get a very strong mind-body connection by just knowing when you're hungry, stopping when you're full, and believing that you can eat whatever you want. But the question becomes, what do you really, really want? Now, in menopause, I think it's really a great question is, what do you really, really want? And just like the transition of adolescence into your 20s, which is what do you want? What do you want to do? And we've all done that work on ourselves. I think our 40s and 50s are kind of the same process. It's a different hormonal issue. It's still a hormonal thing that goes on in the body. And Having a mind-body connection, knowing what the body wants and knowing how to eat when you're hungry and stop when you're full is very different in your 50s than it was when you were 20. So if you've never had that connection, it's not too late. This is a really good time to start. And for many of the women that I've worked with, the pointers that I'm going to go over with you today about the thinner piece process may really help you get on your way. And when I answer this listener's questions, it'll be regarding some of these pointers. So the first pointer that I always think about is to be able to eat when you're hungry and stop when you're full, which means eating between the twos. And you have a physical hunger scale that goes from a -10 to a +10. I'm encouraging you to do is to start at a -2, which is the whisper of hunger, as opposed to a -10, which is starving, and stop at a +2, which is a whisper of fullness and satisfaction, as opposed to a +10, which is stuffed, which is what I would have been on Thanksgiving when I started taking my clothes off. And those twos are whispers, and they're not real strong. And I call them whispers because I think many of you are more accustomed to your body screaming, meaning I'm starving and I'm stuffed, which is not what I want you to do. And I can even remember back in the day in my 50s when no matter what diet I was on, I somehow wanted to make sure that I could get enough food in me to feel really full. So I think even at the pinnacle of most of the diets that I was on, I was really afraid of being hungry. So I would learn how to stuff myself with foods. And I used Weight Watchers for many, many years in the point system. And I would make sure that I would go very, very hungry so I could get very, very full. Because if I knew I could get very, very full, it made me comfortable. Now, I don't know if that's how you are, but eating between the twos is more of this whisper of hunger and whisper of fullness, which is really the way I think our bodies are designed, is that we don't have our bodies scream for hunger and we don't have our bodies scream that it's full. It's these whispers. And I call it you being a body whisperer. So the first question that my listener had was that she said that she's listening to my podcast and she thinks it's very, very good, but she has two questions. Her first question is, what happens when you have to work and so you are eating breakfast, even though you know you're not hungry at all, but it's necessary for energy needed for that day? So I get this question a lot. What do you do if you work different hours or you are in the middle of the day and you're working and you can't eat because of the way your work schedule is? Or like what she's talking about is that maybe when she goes to work, it's breakfast time, but her body is not saying that it's hungry. What do you do? And it's a very good question. So the way that I want to answer that is twofold. Number one, first, you do your very, very best throughout the day to try to eat between the twos and identify what a -2 feels like, which is the whisper of hunger, and what a +2 feels like. So you need to identify those numbers whenever you can. Now, when you first get up in the morning and you think that you need to eat for energy, even though you're not hungry, because you won't be able to eat, maybe at work is what you're thinking, then I say, do your very best, eat something that's nutritious or fuel. So it would be a fuel eating, and maybe you're at a 0, maybe you're at a +1, but identify what your number is when you eat, when you say you're not hungry. So you know what that number is. And then the next time that you eat, which I would assume is going to be at work, can you wait till you're a -2 until you eat again? Because the goal is to try to wait for those -2s and stop at a +2. And at the same time, there's schedules, there's things that happen, and sometimes you can't do that. But I would think for the majority of you, most of the time, you can work around the twos. And when you can't, just identify what you're doing. If you're eating what you call breakfast, and you're not hungry, state what that number is. Is it a -1? Is it a 0? Is it a +1? Is it a +2? Now, I would think if it's in the first thing in the morning, it couldn't be a +2 because you haven't eaten anything yet. But you start just connecting to your body, because identifying the numbers sometimes is more important than sticking with the numbers, because first you have to know what your numbers are. So you identify the number no matter what, and go ahead and eat if you don't think you're going to be able to eat for a while. Or the second thing you could do is don't eat. And when you get to work, you say you do it for energy, but if your body's not saying it's hungry, what if you waited until it was a -2? Would you be able to eat when your body got down to a -2, even if it was at work? So you'll have to answer that question for yourself. If you're in a place where that absolutely cannot happen, and I think most places you can do that, but if you're in a place where you believe you cannot do that, then you do your best within that situation, because the majority of the day still needs to be connecting into your body. This is a really good question for you, the listener that wrote this letter, is when is the hardest time for you to eat when you're hungry and stop when you're full, when you have total choice to do whatever you want? So it doesn't sound like the morning might be that, but what happens when you come home from work? Or what happens in the middle of the day? I think what I would be doing first is just starting to record your numbers. So if you get the Jumpstart Guide, which you can get by going to drdebbutler.com/change, you can get my Jumpstart Guide, which has food journals in it. And for many of you, you may not like the idea of food journals. And you, my dear listener, you may not like it either, but it's imperative to start writing down what these numbers are so your brain can see it. So for instance, when you start your morning and you have your food journal and you're going to eat something, you just record what your hunger scale was before you ate and what your hunger scale was after you ate. I would just start with the physical hunger scale and then do that every time you put food in your mouth for the rest of the day, knowing that you're working to be between the twos. That's the most important thing, is eating between the twos when you can and what comes up for you when you cannot. Like in the morning, what if you did wait to eat? What number would you be at? And could you wait? These are all questions that you start asking yourself, because if your body's not hungry, that means you should have energy in your body anyway. And if your body gets a little hungry, like a -2 or a -3, maybe it can just wait. But the only way to really find out is to test what I'm talking about. So you got to start, and you start with number 1, asking me when you don't understand. And number 2, getting in that food journal. And whenever you sit down to eat, start identifying the number before you eat and the number after you eat. And this is also very, very important. Even though your brain may say, I have no idea what number I am, you must write down the number. And I promise you, if you do this every day for 7 days, by the end of the week, you will have a much better idea of what your numbers are and when you need to eat and when you need to stop, because you're starting to get in sync with your body. So that's the first question, and I hope that helps a lot. And if you have any more, write me some more questions and I'll answer them on the air. But the second question she asked is, do you only have 10 to 20% of your day's food if eating joy foods? I'm a bit confused, as you also say keep eating until you no longer enjoy it. I can't work out how much to get. Okay, so on the second question, one of the standards in my Thinner Peace process, or one of the tools that I use, is types of eating. And there are 4 types of eating that I talk about, which are fuel eating, which is eating food that you can consider nutritious food for your body. And then there's joy eating, which is non-nutritious food for your body, but you really enjoy it. And joy eating should be 10% of your day or 20% of your day, just depending and 80% or 90% should be fuel. The other type of eating is fog eating, and that's any time you either eat when you're not hungry or you eat above a +2, or you're eating a joy food and you eat it bite by bite instead of stopping the minute you're through enjoying it. You keep eating it because your brain's telling you things. Oh, it's so good. Oh, it's so delicious. So you actually are fog eating. So you can have a joy eat, which is 10 to 20% of your day, and it's eating it bite by bite and stopping the minute you're through enjoying it. And fuel food is 80 to 90% of your day, and that is nutritious food for your body, and you do your best to eat between the twos. Joy eating is not based on fullness or hunger. It's based on the enjoyment factor, which means you eat it bite by bite and stopping the minute that you're through enjoying it. So when you talk about percentages, the way that I would look at it is a joy eat can be 1 or 2 joy foods a day. And, it can be a piece of chocolate. It can be a cookie. It could be potato chips. But how you eat it is the most important thing. So for me, my biggest joy eat was always potato chips and French fries. And when I stopped when I was through enjoying it, it might have been 5 or 6 chips or 5 or 6 French fries. So the difference between filling up and enjoying it are very, very different. Fuel foods are about filling up your gas tank. And joy eats is more of a brain enjoyment thing, a taste thing. So you're really getting most of your fuel from fuel. And the joy eating really helps you start thinking about the idea that I can eat whatever I want. Because I think when you think you can't have something, you will want it so much more. But when you think you can eat whatever you want, but you have to stop the minute you're through enjoying it, then you really have to work on tasting it. And many of us, if we've been dieting our whole lives, the only time we eat these non-nutritious, delicious foods is when we think we shouldn't be eating them or we can't be eating them or we're never going to eat them again. So we really aren't tasting them. We're just stuffing them in our mouth and kind of fogging on them. So when I answer this question for my listener, I think it's very important that you eat fuel 80 to 90% and a joy eat is 10 to 20%. So most of the food is going to be coming from fuel, but some will be coming from a joy eat. And I don't know if that makes sense because I know I've had other people ask me about, well, how much can I have? And you really have to test this out. But the idea is that when you're enjoying it bite by bite and stopping the minute you're through enjoying it, it is not a lot of food. Usually, if you want to eat more or you eat a lot more, it's because the brain is gearing in and saying something to you about how delicious it is, how wonderful it is. Your brain is lighting up. And there's a lot of things going on that tell you keep eating it, but it's actually not an enjoyment factor. So I hope this makes sense that you start thinking about that you're counting your twos, eating between the twos most of your day and writing it down and journaling it for a whole week and see how often you can identify your numbers and how often you can actually stick between the twos. And as you start getting your twos down with filling up, eating when you're hungry and stopping when you're full, the joy foods are all about the enjoyment factor and not filling up, but stopping the minute you're through enjoying it. So it's going to be a lot more fuel and a lot less joy eating, but you still are going to be able to believe that if potato chips are what you like, or chocolate chip cookies are what you like, or whatever it is that you like, you can eat it. You just can't eat it past enjoyment because why would you? And that is really a practice if you've been not allowing these foods into your eating way, unless it's either I'm off a diet or you're thinking something that is stopping you from really enjoying it. Many people can't eat a joy food without feeling guilty. There's a lot of emotions that get in the way of enjoying these foods. So I would love for you to practice that this week. is eating a joy eat, bite by bite, and stopping the minute you're through enjoying it, and eating fuel foods in between the twos and identifying your numbers. And I would love to hear from you again if you have more questions, because when I'm working with clients, all of these things come up and even leads to more questions. So as I stop this podcast today and end it, I also want you to know this, because I say it at the end of every podcast. No matter where you go or what you do, please, please, please be very, very kind to yourself. And please write me some emails if you have more questions. And I'll see you next week. Bye-bye. If you're loving my podcast and you would like some more information to be able to follow along with, then please go to drdebbutler.com/change, and you can get a free copy of my companion book that goes with this podcast that I refer to in many different episodes. That is drdebbutler.com/change, CHANGE.